Welcome, welcome everyone. Alex, such a very interesting topic that we have today, and I won't keep you. You're our head moderator now, and I'll be here for support. Just a bit more of a for technicalities. We have a Q&A button, so if you have questions, feel free to add that there, or if you want, you can send it in the chat. So for those who have further questions about what our speakers and Alex will be talking about, feel free to just add that in the chat.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lana. So hi, everyone who's joining us today. My name is Alex, and I am with the Neuroemergence team this year, having this conversation today about neurodivergent friendly spaces. And I'm very excited to be able to introduce our international panel of speakers today. But before I do that, I just want to say that personally, this is like a subject that really gets me out of bed. With a social care background, a landscape architecture background, I'm all for this conversation, and I've been wanting it for a long time. So this feels like my dream come true. So yay, all of you, for being in here. Thank you for supporting me in my dream. So on our screens in front of us, we have Stephen Emmanuel, who is a trained educator, a member of the Academy of Autumn Gillingham Practitioners and Educators. Stephen is the organising secretary of the Association of Nigerian Educational Psychologists and a member of International Association of Special Educators. He is passionate about training pre-service and in-service teachers on strategies to make the classroom inclusive in accommodating neurodiverse learners. We also have joining us today Jean Hewitt, who is currently in Essex in the UK. Jean is a nationally registered and accredited access consultant, focuses on accessibility and inclusion. She's a senior consultant at Brewer Happold. Jean is also an honorary associate professor at the Bartlett, where she leads the Designing Inclusive Places module within UCL's Masters of Health and Wellbeing and Sustainable Buildings programme. Currently, Jean is working on as a technical author for the British Standards Institute's new standard, which is currently being developed, called Designs for the Mind, which focuses on neurodiversity and the built environment, and was released at the end of last year for public consultation. And then from Australia, from Queensland, Australia, we have Barb Cook, who identifies as neurodivergent herself and has extensive experience in working with adults on the autism spectrum, and ADHD, and in creating pathways to support people to attain life goals in the areas of self-determination, self-advocacy, education, employment, health, and interpersonal relationships. She is a registered development educator, deputy chair of the Development Educators Australia Incorporated, and she's also an autism and neurodiversity employment consultant and life coach for neurodivergent adults. She holds a master's degree in autism and focuses with a focus on employment from the University of Wollongong. Fabulous. We have such a cracking level of expertise in this room, and I cannot wait to get into this conversation. So for our attendees listening in, we're going to be talking for the next about 90 minutes on this subject of neurodiversity and designing friendly spaces for people. And each question that we're going to be posing to the panelists is going to have around about 20 minutes to discuss this. And there will be space for question and answers. So please do use the tab, as Lana said, to raise any questions, and she will raise them all at the time during the session. But keep the chat going. The panelists can see the chat. So if there's something you want to respond to, please do so. So I am now going to open up this session, and I'd love to know your thoughts on why this conversation matters. Why are we talking about neurodivergent friendly spaces? So anybody can jump in. And why does it matter to you? Why are you here as well? Feel free to jump in when you're ready. Oh, Jean, you're on mute there.
Apologies. So yeah, happy to go first. I mean, I think for me, the whole aspect of a huge part of society not having environments that are fit for purpose, if you like, for their requirements and their needs. It's been a significant factor for many, many years. And I think I first did my first piece of work on this area was 2009. And it's taken a long time to get this a significant step forward. When I first started working on the development of the PAS, which is a couple of years ago now, I actually thought it would significantly benefit 20% of the population and marginal benefit to the rest. I now think it significantly benefits 40% at least, and has a big benefit to the rest as well. So it's kind of well overdue. And I think COVID has highlighted for many people that many of the workspaces and so forth are not great. So like open plan working, a lot of people when COVID happened was like, oh great, now I can control my own environment at home. Whereas there were many other people also that had poor mental health as a result of the same COVID situation. So I think it's just thrown it all up in the air and said, look, everyone needs to do better. We're just not working hard enough on this.
Brilliant, thank you, Jean. Barb?
That's a really good point, Jean is saying about we've been going through COVID in this last couple of years. It's really shifted the employer's perspective from no, people can't work at home. You have to come into the office. You have to come and work at these particular hours, 9 to 5, the standard hours. Since this has happened, we've seen so much shift going, we can work from home, we can be adaptable. And it's really made a big difference in the terms of people having an environment that they can set up themselves. As you know, when you're at home, you set up your home office to work. It's more helpful in the terms of sensory stuff, in the terms of like I can set up with my own workspace because I have my own home workspace and I have my office workspace. I can set this up how I want. I don't have to go and ask for accommodations from my boss because it's my own home space that we can do this in. And it's really helpful being able to do the work in the terms of I can work at a pace that I want. I don't feel I'm going to have these other distractions again from the sensory point of view of I'm working in an open plan office, which can be really, really overwhelming with people talking next to you, say on phones or talking to other people walking past your desk all the time. The lunchrooms, the lovely noisy lunchrooms and the smells and all of these things that come out of this. This has really made a big shift in so many of these different things. And prior to COVID, when I would go out to workplaces and I would go out to government spaces, I do a lot of work in the area of Australian government in design and looking at how the impact is on employees. It has really made a difference in them having a better look for themselves from this and making that shift. And I also look at they're actually starting to step up and ask about what can we do to assist our employees better. So it's really made a shift. And these conversations, we need to keep going with this sort of stuff, especially, this is why this particular conversation matters, because people are starting to make these changes. We want them to keep doing this. Now, COVID is sort of like, yes, it's still very much here, but we want these particular changes that a couple of years ago, no, we can't do it. We can actually well and truly do it, and we can do it well.
Thank you, Barb. How about you, Stephen? Why is this conversation important for you?
Oh, yeah. First, I'd like to appreciate this brilliant contribution from Barb and Jean. You know, I was just looking at it from different perspective. And then you, Alex, talking before the conversation, talking about it, seeing it from the architectural view. In my own opinion, it's a different ball game entirely because, I was looking at the chat box and I was trying to look at if I could see someone that just looked like me or like just have something different, and this because it's a different conversation on the continent of Africa. It's a different conversation when we come to my story and how these has transformed over the years, when Barb started talking, or was it Jane who mentioned the place of the COVID? And that was exactly the same thing that happened to me. One thing that happened with COVID-19 was to ensure that things are different. Unlike you going to the conventional workspace, now everyone is coming to work digitally. This could be an office space and we're having the conversation, we're interacting all around the continent. But the truth is this, that was what happened to me. I just found that everything down. And then, so what we do to our students. People are criticizing Zoom and other, video meetings to say, okay, can we engage educators? Can we engage our students? Can we use Google Classroom? Can we use every other method? And while they're having that conversation, I was seeing it from a different perspective. And I was saying, okay, the first is we are not even looking at many factors. In my country, we write examination, assessment, and all of the things are designed for neurotypic individuals. And when you raise concerns and you say, okay, how about people who are, who have special needs? And the first thing that comes to the mind of the government when you talk about special needs is someone on a wheelchair or someone who is just walking on the street, who is probably physically, having a disability. And that's where the challenge comes to me personally. And I'm saying, no, this is different. You got to understand that there are amazing statistics you need to know. And sadly, why we understand that 1 in 7 person in the world is neurodivergent, why we understand that 5% of the population is dyslexic, why we understand that we have so many undiagnosed autistic individuals around us. My own story, my own population, in fact, is different when it comes to this, because the first is you talk about the statistics of the people who had gone through standardized assessments. In my own context, it's a different one because I am an undiagnosed ADD, and I had lived all my life not knowing this. And when I started the advocacy saying, come on, we got to talk about these things, people keep asking me, what are you talking about? What's neurodiversity? And I got to tell them, I don't need any dictionary explanation to you. I just let you know that the way your brain is wired is not the same way every other person's brain is wired. The fact that you think in a different way and everybody's not seeing it the same way like you does not imply that they have a problem, does not imply that they have a difficulty or a disability in context. It's just that they are different. And then when I talk about diverse, I say your diversity. I am from a part of the world. You are from different parts of the world. You are from a different parts in your society. For example, in my nation, I am from the Southwest. You are from another place in your own country. So I talk to them. You may not speak my language. I may not speak your language. That's diversity. In the same vein, so in our brains, there is diversity. And you as an educator, you need to recognize that. You as a teacher, you need to know that. As a parent, you need to understand that I got not to compare my kids. I cannot say because this one is doing this, this one should do this. I cannot compare my kids with everyone around in the community. I cannot compare their grades with their contemporaries. It's totally different. And we got to get the message. And then I had to move on. Okay, let's talk about neurodiversity in the workplace. The challenge still goes on whereby you fire individuals because they are not aligning to your own stringent way of doing things. And not until we started making the noise, started making so much things saying, no, no, no. There is diversity in these individuals. And the challenge is not even about these individuals, it's about you. Because you are missing so many things. You are losing so much potential. You're losing so much skills that these individuals are bringing in. The fact that they are not seeing it the same way everybody is seeing it does not imply that something is wrong with them. Something may be wrong with not necessarily you, because you may not have the knowledge of what we're talking about. But I think it's important you go get the knowledge on how to make your workplace neurodiversity inclusive enough for anyone who is neurodivergent. And the interesting thing as a roundup is this. The interesting thing always say, if you make it inclusive for neurodivergent learners, it's also work for neurotypic. If you make it for neurodivergent workers, it's also work for everyone. So being inclusive enough is what we emphasize. Thank you very much.
Wow. Okay. Fabulous. Okay. We're done. No, that was great. Thank you, guys. What an amazing way to start this conversation off. And, so much has come up in here, the impact of COVID, the recognition that, through this enormous shift that we've all gone through globally, it's highlighted things that we maybe didn't understand, or maybe we did understand, but didn't want to have to deal with. And it's now kind of gone, okay, you have to deal with this now. And I love the point that was made around, we can't let the changes that have been building, the momentum that's been building, go backwards. I love that idea that we need to keep moving forward. And I think, Stephen, your point about, what kind of came up from when you were talking was around this idea that we can explore these subjects of neurodivergence through what we have to hand. So, as your example about using language and saying, we're speaking different languages, but where's the commonalities? How do we change? How do we use this as a lens through which we can explore this for people who maybe don't understand? That's incredible, and I'm very excited by what this can mean for how we move forward, especially when we want to keep that momentum in play. So, I just wanted does anybody want to respond to what anybody else has said? I'm just going to stand here with my hands on my face for the session. I think this is what's going to happen. I apologise, but this is really, oh yeah, all the feels. But yeah, does anybody want to respond to what anybody said?
I think just in terms of what Stephen said about, we've got standardised assessments and they don't work for everybody, and that. What's astonishing is it's taken us this long to work out that everybody's brain is unique. And it's just quite incredible, really. We worked out like wheelchair access ages ago, and that people are different sizes and shapes and have different religions and so forth and cultures. But kind of why is this the last one that we're looking at is just quite incredible. And I think it's so important that I mainly do the environment, but obviously for it to work and be a truly inclusive working environment, you've got all the management stuff, you've got everything from even the way people get the job in the first place, which Stephen alluded to. If the assessment process isn't inclusive for all types of brains, then people aren't even going to be in those jobs, which is wrong and immoral and everything else. So really interesting. Great to hear others' perspectives on this. Really great.
It brought up, when you were saying this, Jean, it brought up me thinking about in terms of how we also learn as well. We're visual, or we can listen to things, and this goes for both school and in workplace, for conveying information, whether it's from the teacher or from the employer, how that individual takes that information and uses it. We're all different. We all do this differently. So whether we prefer to have it written and sent it to us in an email to verbally tell us about it, or to allow us to record the information, or ask that, can you just give me 1 or 2 tasks rather than 10 tasks in one sentence, which can happen. And you feel like, how am I going to get this all done? When we actually listen to neurodivergent people and actually support them, whatever way that is, in learning or taking information, or it's going to reduce their anxiety and the stress that comes with this, because this is something that is so huge for neurodivergent people of all ages, for children and adults, is we're constantly anxious about, are we doing this right? We're consciously anxious. We're afraid to speak up and ask about, hey, can you just give us that information again? Hey, can you send this to me in an email so I can look at this and learn this differently? Even in the context of with dyslexia, can you send it to me not in a big chunk of text in very, scripty fonts where I can't read this? Let's look at the colours that come from this, the strengths. As we know, working with Microsoft Word, hey, let's have a nice bright white and black text that we look at. It's very overwhelming. You can imagine if you're sitting and looking at that for 8 hours a day, all these visual stresses and everything that's continually impacting us. So just not for visual, but all other stresses that could be going on sensory-wise with us. You can understand by the end of the day why we're feeling absolutely overwhelmed and struggle with so many different things. It's knowledge definitely from the employer in the terms of looking at all these factors, being able to give choices to the neurodivergent people to be able to choose what's going to work for them best in that capacity, whether it's in school or in the workplace, that allows them to, thrive and feel great and feel supported in that workplace, rather than feeling I'm against a constant battle, I'm constantly overwhelmed, I'm consciously anxious and feeling depressed, and then eventually leading out to burnout, which I see with a lot of my clients. They're hitting towards 30 or 40, absolutely burnt out because these supports weren't in place, and they also didn't know about how they could support themselves as well.
Absolutely, thank you. Stephen, did you have something to say?
just to jump in. Am I permitted, Alex?
Please, yeah. Oh, you're frozen a little bit there, Stephen. Oh, there we are. You're back.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention that from what Barb was saying, just a statement, we should prioritize humanity above talent, you know, and in doing that, we get to see what we are not seeing. Most of the time, we concentrate on deadlines. Most of the time, we concentrate on the productivity that we can measure. Sometimes we do not look at the process that leads to the product. And that's where the challenge comes from. And that's what blinds our eyes sometimes to be able to see what we needed to see. For example, I'd give you this practical example. I was having this conversation and then I got a response as a product and I was saying, no, it's wrong. No, it's wrong. And then the individual explained to me, and then I was ashamed of myself because she took it from a different perspective, what I never thought of, an idea I'd never dreamt of. And then I was wrong in the wrong place. And so the question comes, probably we have been wrong for a long period of time. Probably some of the things we'd always thought should go in a stereotypic way is not expected to. What if we think outside the box? What if we think about maximizing, Barbara's talking about the text color, the quantity of information, and all of these things. What if we look at it, ensuring that everyone gets to do, and then we move forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Wow. As we found with our panel yesterday, I don't want this one to finish either. I'm really struck by this notion that there's a sentence that came out. It's like, are we doing this right? And the question is often placed on the individual who's neurodivergent. Am I fitting into the standards? Am I fitting into the space? Am I making enough of a change in myself to kind of shape myself into what you need me to do? Because that's the lesson that we've been taught. And for us that are identified as being neurodivergent, it's a tricky story. And especially as somebody who was late diagnosed, I'm learning now kind of how much stuff I have to let go of, and how much of this was, really most of the awkwardnesses and the anxieties and depressions that I've experienced in my life have come from trying to fit. And what I was wondering was, like, what if we flip that question around, right? What if we said, are we doing this right? Actually, are we doing this right? Rather than it being on the individual, are we as practitioners, are we as designers, as educators, as employers, are we doing this right? So do we need to change where the question is located? But it kind of leads on to the next question that I want to raise for you all, which is around what trends and changes are you noticing? So we've talked and touched on the concept of COVID and kind of how that's kind of had an impact, and we can go further into that. That'd be kind of really interesting to see that. But what else is going on? We know that there is an increased number of people who are being diagnosed with neurodivergent conditions, and that's in part come from COVID. There's evidence to support that. But what else is going on? And especially given the fact that we have the international perspective, and I really would love to kind of see where the similarities and where the differences are within our experiences. So what's going on, good, bad, or indifferent, with the designs,
I'm happy to go
Please,
first.
Jean, thank you.
Yeah. Generally, in inclusivity, I think in the UK we're seeing quite a huge growth in wider appreciation of interest and respect for difference, whatever that difference may be. So in the UK, we're seeing a lot of articles and information around menopause, designing for menopause, designing for gender transitioning, designing for women and safety, designing for children. And I think neurodiversity is at the forefront and the strongest strand that's going on there. But I'm seeing a huge buy-in of people who want to help, and a lot of keenness to, like, we want to fix this, but we just don't know how. So that's what's really been driving the PAS, is to say, this is the first step. We won't get everything right in this PAS document, but we're having a stab at it, if you like, and we've got some pockets of research and there's some gaps as well identified. But I think I think it's going to take off. I mean, I think when we did the public consultation draft last November, there were 1,600 comments. I was told to expect about 200, and there were 1,600. And I've probably been invited to 30 events to speak about the PAS since then. And this is just one of them. There's so much interest in people getting it right. And the comments that we had, the 1,600, I'm not saying you got it wrong, was like, this is great, let's have more of this, let's fine tune it. Here's another bit of research. And can you just tweak it this way or tweak it that way? And I've just noticed that there's much more awareness that a big proportion of society have not been diagnosed but may well be neurodivergent. And a huge acceptance that there are lots of people out there. I think the diagnosis period in the UK is around 2 years at the moment, 2-year wait. So there are lots of people now beginning to understand, I've always thought I was different, but I didn't really understand. And now I'm thinking it is a strand of neurodivergence, basically not being neurotypical. And I want to do something about it. And that's a really good thing. And I think that will hopefully help it to develop further. So that's the UK anyway.
Wonderful, thank you, Jean. And Jean, just for people who maybe don't know what the PAS is, can I just ask you just to explain what that is? Because I think it's a really interesting document. And for people who maybe aren't aware of it, just a little context would be really helpful.
Sure, of course. So in the UK, we have British standards, which are our guidance documents. And what a PAS is, it's called a publicly available specification. And it is a series of guidelines that may or may not become a standard in due course. So it's like a first toe in the water, if you like, first step in the water. And it's voluntary for people to follow. And typically it's a document that has around a 2-year shelf life once it comes out. And this one will be published by the autumn. And people can access it for a couple of years and evaluate it in use and apply it, and then feed back into the process to make it better. And if it's successful and people like some of the guidance in there and they think it's worthwhile, all or some of it will end up in a British standard, basically. But at the outset of starting that PAS process, we did a literature review and we looked across the world to try and find formal guidance documents around designing for neurodiversity. And I apologise if you know of some, but we really didn't. We found very, very little in the way of formal guidance or standards on this. So we have big hopes that this might be the start of something that could grow internationally.
Maybe today might be the start of that, even more so, hey?
There's already a request from the chat if there can be links shared. So we'll get that from Jean, and we'll also be sharing that later on.
Yeah, thank you, Lana. Absolutely. So Stephen and Barb, what about you? What's your perspective? So we have the UK and the PAS that's coming through right now. What's happening in Australia and Nigeria? What are you seeing as the trends and the changes that are happening?
From my perspective as a developmental educator, the things that are changing from my space, so as a developmental educator, it can be a little bit misleading in my title for people that don't know. People think that we're teachers. We're not. We're allied health professionals here, so we work in the space from the social model of disability, not the medical model of disability. So we look at supporting the person as they are and looking at what in the environment is impacting on it or is disabling to them. The person is not broken. We look at that different perspective. And we also have very much a neurofeminine practice in what we do too. So it's a very holistic and supportive approach of the individual and then looking at what is impacting them from the environment around them. And we're finding here in Australia, it's becoming quite a bit of a shift now, not just with us as developmental educators, but occupational therapists, psychologists are taking this more on board, looking at, okay, we don't need to give them therapy or to go and fix them. We need to support them and look at what their visions, what their goals are, what do they need support with. Let's have a look at what's going on sensory-wise, what's going on in the workplace, what's going on in school. Let's observe and listen to the people and see how we can best support them and guide them through what would work for them. And as Alex was saying about fitting in, and that's something I always very much emphasise, and it's some of my tagline, stop trying so damn hard to fit in. We are all different. we've got to really take a big step back from all of this. There is no one right way to do things or be as a human being. And we're starting to see shift in people accepting that, being okay with people being different and being able to do things differently. We also emphasise as well in things like with stimming in the workplace. It's okay. You know, everybody does it. It's just us neurodivergent people that get called out for it, you know. Bob over there that's twiddling his pen doesn't get called out for it. But if I'm sitting here and I'm squishing my ball and doing my thing because I also have ADHD and it's sort of like I usually breaking pens and all sorts of things if I have them in my hands. But we tend to get called out or we tend to get weird looks. So we're trying to get across as much information. All these things are okay. They help us get through the day, especially in stressful situations if we're trying to think. Doodling's another good one. People think, oh, you're bored with it. No, doodling helps me think. It helps me take in the information. Eye contact, another one. If I look at you, I have no idea what you're telling me because I'm going, this is painful, or you've got really long eyelashes. They're really fascinating. It can be all sorts of things. For me, I can't look at people when I need to listen to information. I have to look away so I can actually take on board what you're telling me. Breaking down all these stereotypes. Oh, we must have quiet hands. We must look at people in the eye. Oh, goodness. It needs to go into the bin. No more of this, except however we are, however we behave, however we look, is completely fine. And we are seeing a shift in this, which I'm really glad to see, especially from the level in the perspective I am from the therapeutic space, because people come to us thinking there's something wrong with them or there's something that needs fixing. No, there isn't. We're here. We'll support you. We'll tell you totally okay. Let's look at things differently. And we're getting there.
Thank you, Barb. Stephen, over to you. What's your take on this?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you once more. Excuse me, please. You know, there's something while Jim was talking about the UK, I was looking at it from a different perspective because I work and definitely I do have contacts and some of the members of my board are from the UK and we have conversations, we talk. The challenge I have is UK is leading, if I must say, when it comes to recognition of diversity. And, you know, when it comes to early diagnosis, when it comes to talking about this, when it comes to bringing in the government, you know, raising voices, that's amazing. Now, I like to say in my continent and in my context from the Nigerian perspective, we are not even starting. That's the challenge. Because now, sorry, I may become very loud about this, but just please accept the pain. The reason is because how do we talk about this? Number one, we are leading when it comes to number of out of school children. So when you want to talk about other issues, these are issues that come up. The second thing is we are approaching the political season. And then, you know, so many things are happening. And it appears the only thing in the news, the only thing that gains traction is politics. That's the second. Third, we keep having this segregation. Okay, if it's not going to be economically inclined, if it's not politically projected, then you do not have a voice around it. Now, the only advantage we have, right, and I fear that it's rapidly leaving, and that's the advantages. Those who are stakeholders, for example, let me give you two critical examples. So leading organizations when it comes to diversity in my country, we are able to come out to say, okay, we want to do this because their own children had issues. They knew something was wrong. They knew this child is different and they could not help. And then they took the child out of the country and then the child was diagnosed. And they're like, wow, so something like this existed. And then they came back to the country and then they raised their voice. And so The challenge with that is that's personal, and that's something I love, but it's quietly leaving the space. Why? Because of the rates of insecurity in the nation. So the people who are raising their voices, the people who are trying to do one or two things are gradually leaving. So there's a massive brain drain. That's the first. The second is this: because of the pressure. For example, in my own context, I go to schools, I speak all around trying to raise awareness. But may I let you know that in the past 2 months, I've not done any like that. Why? Because of the security issues. I could just move to, I like to work with people in the low income environments because I know they need it more. They may not have access to the traditional media. They may not have access to social media where I have all of my spaces. So I need to go speak in their language. I need to go give them practical examples. And now I'm scared of going to those places because of the rates of insecurity in the nation. So this is not to spotlight the challenges in my nation, but it's to let you understand that the conversation has not started. And why we may be talking about neurodiversity, if you just want to do this, just type on Google, just type neurodiversity in Africa. The results you will get will be stunning because what you will see is probably autism you would not get specifically. I was having a conversation with Dan, and that's the founder of Neurodiversity in Business, and I volunteer for Neurodiversity in Business in the UK. And I was saying, okay, come on, let's bring this to Africa. I'm going to compile a list of organizations in Africa to you, and then you're going to be on their neck, trying as much as possible. The same thing you did with KPWG, the same thing you did with other organizations. You got to tell them their branches in Africa. You got to enforce these same rules. You've got to ensure that these things work. The challenge is, yes, so many things are changing. The fear is this: how soon? And I am afraid that we count 2 steps forward, we count 5 steps backward. Why? Because of fear, because of the prevailing challenges. So I appreciate what's going on in Australia, I appreciate what's going on in the UK, but I'm afraid that as much as we try to raise voices on the continent of Africa, other prevailing challenges are stifling our voices. And if care is not taken, this may not be a conversation in a few time. Thank you.
Alex, I just want to
Please, Lana.
jump in because I was deeply touched by what is being shared, especially with what you've been sharing, Stephen. And oh gosh, and yes, I do agree. We don't have these spaces in different parts of the world. It's like as a Filipino coming in and living in the Netherlands, this is something that I feel so deeply um, torn about. That we're not having the right conversations